Her name was Irma Grese. She was 22 years old when they hanged her. Blonde, young, by most accounts, striking. The kind of face you wouldn't look at twice on a street corner. And yet the testimonies against her ran for hundreds of pages. Beatings, torture, sadistic abuse documented by survivor after survivor. Women who had lived through the worst years of the war and still said her name with something colder than hatred. So here is the question this video is actually asking. How does that happen to a person? I've seen men break in the field. Seen what pressure does. What fear does. But she wasn't under pressure. She wasn't at the front. Nobody put a gun to her head. She applied. She trained. She walked involuntarily. And that's precisely what makes her case so difficult to set aside. Because if she had been coerced, we could file it away neatly. But she wasn't. She was drawn toward it. Which means the question isn't just about her. It's about the system that shaped her. The ideology that found her. And the moment, or series of moments, where an ordinary girl from a quiet German village became one of the most documented perpetrators in the entire concentration camp system. That path is what we're tracing today. But before we reveal the full account, drop a comment and tell us what your favorite piece of World War II history is, or let us know if you're a collector of wartime artifacts. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy World War II historical stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. She was born on the 7th of October, 1923 in Retchen, a small rural settlement in Mecklenburg, northern Germany. Flat countryside. Open fields, scattered forests, lakes. The kind of place where nothing much happens. Her father Alfred managed a local estate and supervised a dairy. Her mother Berda kept the household, tended a small garden, raised pigs, geese, chickens. Third of 5 children. Nothing in the early record suggests anything out of place. Sounds like half the villages in Europe at that time. Ordinary people. Ordinary problems. Nothing that would explain what came later. And that's where it gets complicated. Because her sister Helen, who testified at the Belsen trial, described a child who was frightened of confrontation. Ran away from fights. Couldn't bear violence. Helen's exact words, when the girls would quarrel and fight, my sister never had the courage to join in. On the contrary, she would run away. Which raises an obvious problem. Because the woman standing trial in 1945 was not described by any survivor as someone who ran from conflict. Something changed. And the question is when, and what triggered it. There's always a when. Always something that cracks things open. Late 1935. Irma is 12 years old. Her mother Berda discovers her father Alfred's affair with a local innkeeper's daughter. What follows is not a confrontation. Not an argument. Berda asks the children to clean the house from top to bottom. Once everything is in order, she sends them out to fetch their father from the tavern. And while they are gone, she ingests hydrochloric acid. Christ. Berda survives the initial attempt but dies several months later, in January 1936. It is Irma who discovers her. 12 years old. Finding that doesn't leave you. That follows you everywhere you go for the rest of your life. The accounts from the period describe a visible shift in her behavior. Previously unremarkable, she becomes quieter, more withdrawn, isolated. Neighbors recall her standing alone on a hill, whistling. Peers bully her. She stops integrating. She pulls back from almost everything, friendships, social groups, ordinary adolescent life. But here is where the record becomes complicated again. Because loss alone doesn't explain what she became. Countless children lose parents. Countless grow up in fractured homes. Most do not end up in the testimonies of Auschwitz survivors. So the fracture is part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture. Something had to fill the space she left open. 1933, Hitler takes power. Irma is 9 years old. By the time she reaches secondary school, every classroom in Germany has been restructured. Racial purity, Aryan identity, national glory. Not presented as extreme politics, presented as basic education. The curriculum made no distinction between history and doctrine. When you grow up inside something, you don't see it from outside. It's just the way things are. That's the danger nobody talks about. And Irma was not just passively exposed to it. By her own account, she found it compelling. She described the Weimar Republic as excessively liberal, morally degenerate. She was drawn, genuinely drawn, to the conservative, nationalist framework that National Socialism was offering to young people in rural Germany. Her father, Alfred, reportedly opposed the party. He tried to prevent Irma and her sister Helen from joining the League of German Girls, the BDM. They joined anyway. Of course they did. Because the BDM was offering something the household couldn't. Belonging, structure, a clear sense of identity and purpose. Irma later told a survivor and former prisoner, Magda Hellinger, that she was very proud to be a member. Her word, proud. Because membership was restricted to those considered genuinely Aryan. For a girl who had spent years feeling invisible, being told she was special, belonged to something, mattered, that is not a small thing. It filled the gap. And it came with a price tag she either didn't see or didn't care about. At 14, you don't always read the fine print. No. But you carry it anyway. 1939, Irma is 15. She is recommended by her local BDM branch and placed as a trainee nursing assistant at a sanatorium called Hohenlicken, roughly 32 kilometers south of Rechen. The director is a man she later describes as a saint of the Nazi Party. His name was Karl Gebhardt, orthopedic surgeon, one of the earliest members of the Nazi Party, present at the 1923 beer hall putsch alongside Hitler himself. He would later be convicted at Nuremberg and sentenced to death for conducting medical experiments on living human subjects, primarily Jewish women transferred from the nearby Ravensbrück camp. And this is where she's learning to be a nurse. For 2 years. The experiments included bone transplantation, sulfanilamide drug trials on deliberately infected wounds, nerve reconstruction research. All framed, within those walls, as necessary wartime science. Senior Nazi figures, Albert Speer, Reinhard Heydrich, Rudolf Hess, were treated at the facility. It was not simply a hospital. It was an ideological environment. That is where the desensitization most likely began. Not in a camp. Not in a uniform. In a clinical setting where suffering was medicalized, normalized, filed under research. Day after day. Until it stopped registering as cruelty at all. That is a specific and deliberate kind of corruption. By the time she put on the SS uniform, she'd already been trained to look at human beings and not see them as fully human. The camp just gave her permission to act on it. In 1941, Gebhardt dismisses her. She has not met the standard required to qualify as a nurse. He then, in what may be the single most consequential referral of this entire story, suggests she apply to Ravensbrück concentration camp, and hands her the contact details. One conversation. And everything that followed traces back to that moment. July 1942. Irma Grese enters Ravensbrück as a trainee guard. She is 18 years old. She joins the women's auxiliary of the SS and begins formal training. From this point forward, the documentary record changes completely. There's something about a uniform when you've spent years being ignored. When doors open for you. When people step aside. When you realize for the first time that fear is directed at you rather than through you, that's a dangerous kind of power to hand to someone carrying everything she was carrying. The Belsen trial prosecutor, Colonel Backhouse, argued exactly that. He observed that her timidity vanished the moment she put on the swastika. That the authority didn't just change how others saw her, it transformed how she saw herself. Within months, the pattern that would define her wartime career begins to emerge. Beatings. The use of trained dogs. Arbitrary punishment. A systematic cruelty that survivors would later struggle to describe in words adequate to what they had witnessed. She moved from Ravensbrück to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Then to Bergen-Belsen. Each posting generated more testimony. More accounts. More names, the Beast of Belsen. The Blonde Angel of Auschwitz. The Hyena of Auschwitz. Each name an attempt by someone who survived to put language to something they had seen. Some things resist language. You just know what it felt like to be in that yard when she walked through it. On the 13th of December, 1945, at Hamelin prison, Irma Grese was hanged. She was 22 years old. She walked to the gallows without visible distress. Said almost nothing. Which may be the most unsettling detail of all. Not the crimes. Not the record. But the silence at the end. As if none of it required explanation, even to herself. Maybe it didn't. Maybe that's the point. Maybe by the time you've been through everything that shaped her, the broken home, the ideology, the clinical exposure to atrocity, the uniform, the authority, maybe there's nothing left that registers as wrong. And that question, how ordinary systems produce that outcome, doesn't resolve neatly. It sits there, unfinished. Because the honest answer is that Irma Grese was not a uniquely evil anomaly. She was what a particular system, applied to a particular person at a particular moment of vulnerability, produced. How many others walked the same path? That's the question we should still be asking.